Most people are taught a simple, comforting story about money. Long ago, we are told, humans struggled with barter. A farmer had grain but needed shoes. A shoemaker had shoes but wanted meat. Trade was clumsy, inefficient, and slow. So eventually, someone had a bright idea. Money. Coins appeared, trade became easier, markets expanded, and civilization marched forward. It's a clean story, logical, comforting, and mostly wrong. Money did not emerge because barter was inconvenient. Money emerged because power needed a tool. And once that tool existed, it never stopped shaping who controlled value, labor, and violence. Welcome to The Financial Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Before money, value without markets. Before money, most human societies did not operate on barter at all. Inside small communities, people didn't constantly negotiate exchanges. They relied on memory, obligation, and trust. You gave because you belonged. You received because you were known. Debts weren't written down. They were remembered. Value wasn't abstract. It was social. And this system worked remarkably well, as long as society stayed small. But scale changes everything. When trust failed to scale. As populations grew, villages became cities. Trade expanded beyond kin and neighbors. Strangers arrived with unfamiliar customs and no shared history. And suddenly, trust stopped working. Memory broke down. Obligation weakened. Violence increased. And rulers faced a problem barter could never solve. How do you feed an army that doesn't know you? How do you tax people you will never meet? How do you extract value from a population spread across vast territory? This is where money truly enters the story, not as convenience, but as infrastructure. Metal, making value portable. For value to move across distance, it needed a body, something durable, portable, divisible. Food spoiled, livestock wandered, land couldn't move, labor vanished the moment it was used. Metal solved the problem. Copper, bronze, silver. These weren't chosen because they were shiny. They were chosen because they behaved well under pressure. They didn't rot. They could be melted and reshaped. They could be divided precisely. And most importantly, they were scarce enough to matter, but common enough to circulate. Metal didn't just store value, it made value mobile. Money was born in palaces, not markets. But it wasn't merchants who turned metal into money. It was rulers. Early states in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Eastern Mediterranean didn't need money to trade. They needed money to command. Armies don't fight on promises. Soldiers don't march on goodwill. They need payment, and payment must be standardized, recognizable, and enforceable. Once states demanded taxes payable in metal, everything changed. People who once lived outside markets were forced into them. Subsistence became obligation. Harvests became liabilities. To obtain metal, peasants had to sell their labor, their goods, or their time. Markets didn't emerge organically. They were pulled into existence by taxation and power. Money didn't free people from rulers. It made rulers vastly more efficient. Accounting came before coinage. This is the part history textbooks rarely emphasize. Money was never neutral. It wasn't invented to help trade between equals. It was designed to measure, extract, and redeploy value at scale. That's why the earliest financial centers weren't marketplaces. They were temples and palaces. Priests and kings tracked grain, metal, and labor long before merchants traded freely. Ledgers came before coins. Accounting came before markets. The system was built top-down, not bottom-up. Coins, stamping trust with authority. Then came the revolution. Stamped metal. When early states began minting coins, marking pieces of metal with official symbols, they weren't just standardizing trade. They were stamping trust itself. A coin sent a powerful message. You don't need to trust the person holding this. You only need to trust whoever put their mark on it. Authority replaced relationship. In Lydia, in Greek city-states, and later in Rome, coins carried faces of gods, emperors, and symbols of power. They weren't just economic tools. They were political messages. Every transaction reinforced who ruled. Every payment reminded people whose system they lived inside. The birth of inflation. Once rulers realized they controlled money, temptation followed. If you control money, you control how much exists, how pure it is, how fast it circulates. Early governments learned they could stretch resources by reducing metal content,
clipping coins, issuing more than reserves justified. Spending became easier. Consequences were delayed. Inflation wasn't discovered in modern times. It was invented the moment money became adjustable. Prices rose. Trust weakened. Soldiers demanded higher pay. And yet, the system endured. Because once money existed, societies couldn't go back. The tool was too powerful. Money made power patient. Here is the critical realization. Money didn't evolve away from power, it evolved with it. When value could be stored, authority no longer depended on constant coercion. Power could be accumulated quietly. Armies could be funded before wars began. Bureaucracies could grow during peacetime. Money made authority patient, and patience is a form of power. That's why monetary systems outlast rulers. Kings fall, empires collapse, borders shift, but the logic of money remains. From Rome to today. By the height of Rome, money was everywhere. Markets thrived. Trade networks spanned continents. Coins passed through countless hands, carrying no memory of who mined the metal, who was taxed, or who suffered when value was manipulated. Abstraction did its job. The system felt natural, invisible, inevitable. And when pressure mounted, rulers didn't question the system. They diluted it. Sound familiar? Modern money no longer jingles in pockets, but it still carries the DNA of bronze and silver. Today's currencies aren't backed by metal. They're backed by authority, obligation, and enforcement. The language changed. Debasement became liquidity. Clipping became balance sheets. Emperors became institutions. But the mechanism stayed the same. The final truth. Money was never designed to be fair. It was designed to be scalable. Fairness has always been negotiated politically, never guaranteed structurally. This isn't a conspiracy. It's history. Understanding this changes how you see inflation, debt, and crises. These aren't accidents. They're features of a system built to manage large populations, large obligations, and large power imbalances. Real financial freedom doesn't come from rejecting money. It comes from understanding what money was built to do and what it was never meant to provide. Money can move value. It can store labor. It can coordinate massive systems. But it cannot guarantee fairness. It cannot replace judgment. And it cannot protect those who mistake structure for security. The most dangerous assumption isn't that money is corrupt. It's that money is neutral. History doesn't repeat, but the logic it runs on rarely changes. And once you see that logic clearly, you stop asking why the system behaves this way. You start asking a better question. Where do I stand inside it? If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe.